gunne odan mapol mukana ke wawai ot mukana ke bolu pi what mon ma tike igi magana ko.
I feel so emotional about doing this interview because it's been a long time for people to listen to our story. People are not willing to talk openly or come to the camera and say what has happened to them. Because if you tell the truth, they will come after you.
Genocide is an especially intended, organized, planned project. You must intend to destroy a community, to destroy a society. And genocide is when you systematically carry out such a project for the purpose of destroying a people or a society. And that's exactly what Museveni did in northern Uganda.
If you say Uganda to somebody outside of Africa, they're going to think Idi Amin, this British trained soldier who rose to power and through military strength and everything, he became president of the country. People give estimates about how many people he exterminated or assassinated political opposition. Museveni's done more. Yet nobody associates Museveni with atrocities.
We have, as a country, been independent for 50 years. And in all these 50 years, there has never been peaceful change of government. Every person who has come into government has bombed his way into government. And whoever has left government has been bombed out of government. That underpins the crisis in which the country is, that we are governed by guns, not by the will of the people.
Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni is one of the longest-serving African leaders, with almost 3 decades in power. He has been lauded by Western leaders for his promises of democracy, economic growth, for reducing poverty and the rate of HIV.
When Museveni came, he pledged not to be corrupt. He said the army should be for the people. He mastered the language of the World Bank and the IMF. Museveni managed to impress the Western world. They didn't know that he was actually a wolf in a sheep's skin.
For Mr. Museveni, everything is about power. His power, his hold on power. That's all he's interested in. Anyone who challenges his hold on power is an enemy. The National Resistance Movement, when we came, we were a conquering force. We were a conquering force. We controlled power. So when we came, and then we controlled the resources. And then we controlled the political process. And then we controlled the diplomatic front. Political forces were co-opted into a militaristic establishment, military structures of domination survived in the so-called new state, which was perceived to be democratic. But actually it was not.
In 2006, I was a presidential candidate, nominated from prison, charged with treason, with terrorism, with rape, with illegal possession of firearms. And half the campaign ended while I was still in prison.
Museveni is the megalomaniac. He's someone who wants to control power, exercise it, and dominates the process. Everything that is done must be done in such a way that it must ensure the holding of the center of control, relying on security forces, on the military, on finance control. That type of management requires extensive control. We were playing politics, using command and control. When you have such a thing in place, then nothing can remove you, because virtually you control all aspects of public life.
As with most African countries, Uganda's borders was drawn during colonial rule. There's a broad division between the northern Nilotic people, the largest ethnic group being the Acholi, and the Bantu people of the south. British colonial practices led to an uneven economic development in Uganda, with southern Uganda becoming more prosperous than the north. There was a distinct dichotomy, and Ugandan politicians exploited this difference.
Even the newspapers in Kampala used to draw the line of Uganda minus northern Uganda.
Museveni's become the master and divine in rule. He knows how to set one ethnic group against the other to his own advantage and for his benefit.
This same Yoweri Museveni poisoned the mind of the people. He divided Ugandans along the lines of the Bantus and the Nilotics. He poisoned the mind of the so-called Bantu. That look, it's these northerners who are the problem. Yeah? So destroy them, let's fight them. He characterized us as enemies, and this has been the primary policy of this government.
So going to the north was a process, was a continuation of the process to put the whole country under the control of the National States Movement, which was a new force.
The people came to power in NRM, they believe in military power. The only way they could have got power was through the military. And they want to make sure, actually, that the people who might present the greatest threat to them were eliminated.
Museveni's army was moving from village to village. If they were not burning houses, then they're shooting people down. If they are not shooting people down, they are destroying crops. So people had nothing and nowhere to go.
The NRA troops formed of people from central and western Uganda that then took charge of northern Uganda. Some of them started some revenge actions.
The kind of war that was waged by the NRA was horrible. They killed people, they burnt houses, they destroyed their property.
I was the first commander there from 86 to 90. Just a few years, 86, 87, 88, 89, 90. Some groups who didn't have the discipline we had, now under our command, committed some atrocities.
Gunne Odanma Paul
Mukane ka wawai up. What mon ma tike igi. Maganda ko. Ma gin manar ka wa. Taka ke nui ke nere. Ma mu duko ke ka biele ngege kan ka kitika wot kare unyu kok ne nungin neki.
This time the government went to the village and started rounding people. They started just shooting at random. My sister-in-law had put the baby at the back, so she ran with the son. And then they hid under a small bush. They came and found so they pumped the bullet on the head of the baby. And then she fell dead. She and the baby's body has not been found up to today. Because what Museveni has been doing, which is really genocide, is that some people mass murder that he committed, yet collected the body and taken them away, so that there is no proof.
Magina ampa mo gen magyan boy katimone wadiang magi makaw kita kitar kamurni wedog diang nugo ngam dego kireni nugo ngur kan ni piri ye tiata ko gen mane amara dan ko bega mo log jon bega purwa ke cho ke mon timaraju.
They actually, as a tribe or as an ethnic nationality group, now feel threatened, feel isolated. They have no friends.
Women have been raped terribly, and rape is being used as a weapon of war. A lot of women who have been raped cannot tell their story. One is because nobody is going to believe them. Second is they may be arrested and even killed.
This is deep-seated injustice to a particular group. And we think we've been singled out for alienation or for reduction.
In addition to women being raped, men were being raped for the first time, which at that time was unheard of.
On Museveni's orders, his soldiers raping men in front of their families, in front of their children, in front of their wives, deliberately. First, to convey HIV/AIDS, but two, to display a most public act of humiliation. It is to humiliate not just the person who is the victim, but the entire family and the entire community. This was done systematically.
Tuale Johnny Premier Bedletela. And Maguk one amateur, repi amateur piani. And he would quay. Burukere Makaluni rapping. And done a beat. Magunyana, Patwer word, would a pere Kago Guga and Kakeni Ilum Kunu. Yoni Polgi Magburgdani, Polgi Tikitu, Benjo Magi Burquegi, Kabe one Joma knock out the more. Paul Jomogi Burquegi, Magi Burgi, Wingi, Dudgi, Ikakumi Yuri, Burgidoni, to Maldal. Unito, Dalbeta.
Part of the program has not been really
to reduce the people of northern Uganda to less than human beings. Hate must only go so far. Even if you take that northern people, there are things you don't do. There are things you don't do. If you hate people, you do not have to dehumanize them for 27 years. You do not have to perpetuate a war for 27 years because you hate people.
The people started saying, they are killing us, they're destroying our crops, they're destroying our children, and nobody's talking about it. Now it's only God that's going to protect the Acholi people. That is how the name Lord Registered Army came about. Because nobody's going to speak for us. It is only us and God. That's how the name came about. And that's when the Lord Registered Army came into picture.
My military position, who is fighting in Uganda. I'm a freedom fighter who is fighting for freedom in Uganda.
Used to say that when you are a man and someone come to your family, begin harassing your mother, begin harassing your sister, and you are young, when you are able to fight that person, you can't fold your hand. You must pick something to fight that person in order to defend life of your people. That is why he's picking harm, because government want to take wealth from this part of the country. Government want to kill people.
Tiga me wa bom awanu umi ko mi do donyo ka me awanu be do ka donyo pi berelu pigamente eno.
You could say Joseph Kony is a victim who becomes a perpetrator. I think the violence in Uganda is like those things we see in vampire movies. When a vampire bites you, you become a vampire. And in many ways, Kony has become like Museveni, using force and violence. How do we understand what made Joseph Kony, who apparently grew up in a peaceful northern Uganda, how did he become so violent?
Some of the people in this land, they are supporting the state instead of supporting Kony. And from there, Kony grew annoyed that I'm fighting for you and you are supporting my enemy who want to take your wealth, who want to destroy your life. It means that you don't want to live. It is better I kill you rather than them killing you. And he always kills government supporters.
We are fighting for democracy. We want people to be with total democracy, free. We should be free to elect our leader. We want our leader to be elected leader, but not a movement like the one of Museveni.
Machalo Yoweri mer ki lweny matek weke to ariama no enti ye kom weke to Uganda ma enti ye ne wek kacharo en machalo dit kon mir e ko pinule no dongan pango gi chunge to ka na ne ke ti ye ranyi maracha ro yen mo gi lwene jo mala ngai mir gi mi wan gi mi ne bodge ka wek no ponjo mo kanene ka I bino mir bed machalo in dit ma mir kon kenyo ka do pe mir gi mi tim kitan na kerno kitwer gi mir da kit lega gi mir ke da kit la dit gi wach gi ke
anyone who wasn't on the LRA side, the LRA saw as being against them. So they would use violence, horrible violence against civilians, but that they, in their view, was meant to destroy government support, convince the Acholi not to support the government. And the LRA is not unique in this fashion. There's rebel groups all over, and state militaries all over the world that use violence in this kind of, spectacular, horrible atrocity in order to send a political message.
Ironically, in spite of the violence he has meted out against the people, he believes he's a crusader for the community. That's how he sees himself. He shares the view by the Acholi people that Museveni is out to destroy them. So even defeating Museveni may not be the primary goal, but to survive, first and foremost. So Joseph Kony told me that. I next asked him, what do you want? And he said, Museveni, who has destroyed our home, should also know what it is like to be a victim of war.
Joseph Kony's strategy of abduction and then taking children into captivity and then changing them into child soldiers became a very big problem. And then those who refused to join him, the pressure of torture came in. They said since the local population has joined to fight them, they are also going to take the war to them. So the first thing was Joseph Kony began massive retaliation, very, very bad retaliation on the local population by the insurgents of the Lord's Resistance Army.
This is not to whitewash any of the crimes committed by the LRA, but there have now been government soldiers coming forward and revealing that in many instances, government soldiers would actually perpetrate these atrocities and then make it appear as if the LRA had committed those crimes.
Don't be on the wing, and the way you got in the PM. We got to make one Mama dear. Those who see you there, the other man don't see. Oh, that's our one. Look, well, Annie. Nó thì chèo qua ra, còn cái mùa ăn. Bên cái tàu nó cái quạt ra kia, vật cho cái này chọn qua ở đây. Đừng cho về là xem đi. Đam này cái này đó qua cái rồi. Cái bà biết cái tẹp phim. Để được ra. Cái ăn bên ấy. Con phèo na yêu bị mình con ngoài vậy, về đi nha, anh biết gì lộc đi.
Ka madong, kemawadong gitarwa. Ka wang gidegi, kibir kin dan ken no gordan o kito in. Sigi bion sigi kichika kichiri kila kiri, umir mul cherbori, kemare,
The government soldiers would dig holes into the ground, and people would be forced inside those holes. And then the top would be covered with wood, with grass, and then with earth. And then that would be set on fire. So in other words, people are actually roasted alive.
If you get people and had them we had cells which were called andaki. Andaki, you dig ground, you dig trenches, and then you put in prisoners down under, and then you cover poles on them. They were excesses committed.
We were to Lumora, Perdana, the Bume Tomato, Full without a yacon. Karmajucha book down. Go, which you are a joke and career of wow. Rodon doing what kind of duty wine come with my ear again.
Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch have documented these atrocities. Yet, Museveni is untouchable. Why is Museveni untouchable? Because he has the protection of the United States government. And until the United States government is done with him, nothing will ever happen to him. He will continue to be elected, and he'll continue to rule Uganda with an iron fist.
America is part of the problem of Africa right now. The Americans know very well that Kony is not the problem. Where the oil wells are, the American troops are there, and the government in power. It doesn't matter whether that person is Museveni killing his own people is not democratic, that he is a friend.
People need to learn that they will not be above the law, that they're accountable, and that what we're trying to see is a much more secure future going forward. If people see they can get away with murder, they'll commit murder if they can.
If the U.S. really was serious in saying that it ties its foreign policy with human rights conditions, then we must be living in a dream world, but certainly not in this world that we live in.
You see, governments are not necessarily charity organization. They have national interest to protect. They have national power to protect.
The U.S. utilizes Ugandan military and Ugandan forces and sticks money in the pocket of the president of that country, where the president is guilty of atrocities against his own people, is heinous. And that's not put on the radar screen in terms of atrocities or crimes against humanity.
States must serve their people's interests. So if there was a government in the BRICS region which was stable and which could actually therefore advance the interests of these countries, which were genuine interests, there was nothing wrong with it. The only thing is that with time, these interests became hostile to the interests of our people. Because then Museveni used his strategic alliance with the Western powers to oppress the people of Uganda. Because he knew he did not need their mandate to rule. Instead, he needed the understanding of the West.
The human rights abuse, the gross abuse by both the LRA and the NRA, or the government army, upon Acholi has been so widespread and so complete that no part of Acholi was spared.
The West has been complicit, and their complicity is basically in their silence. As Ugandans bled to death, they continued singing praises to Museveni.
Why was this calamity in northern Uganda ignored? It was in plain view of anyone who wanted to see it. Jan Egeland, the United Nations Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, called it the world's worst unreported disaster.
It's a shame, and we have got to tell the decision makers in America, in Britain, France, and Germany that they betrayed the people of Uganda by not looking at the whole of Uganda.
It was not in their interest to expose what was going on in northern Uganda, and they helped to conceal. It was a conspiracy of silence, both within the country, but particularly internationally.
Now, how can modern armies how can modern nations, how can civilized nations allow that to go on and plead ignorance and plead to the international community that they knew nothing about it? How can the international community itself say that they didn't know about that?
Museveni did nothing to stop, much less defeat Joseph Kony, because he needed Kony first in order to carry out his genocide project. He wanted LRA to provide the pretext, the cover, while the group did not pose any challenge at all to his government. Whatever distraction